Hello, and welcome to our presentation for CS 364. My name is Michael Schmidt.
And I'm Freddy Kwaku.
And today we are going to discuss the interview's elicitation technique.
In the first place, we want to define what a requirement elicitation is. Requirement elicitation is concerned with learning and understanding the needs of users and project sponsors with the ultimate aim of communicating these needs to the system developers.
And now we have a definition of interviews. An interview is a verbal exchange of information between two or more people for the principal purpose of one gathering information from the others.
There are different formats of interviews, which are many to one, one to many, and one-on-one. The many to one is a situation where we have many interviewers asking questions to an interviewee. The one to many consists of an interviewer asking questions to many interviewees, and the one-on-one consists of an interviewer asking questions to an interviewee.
There are three types of interviews that we would like to discuss. First, structured, next, unstructured, and finally, semi-structured.
The structured interviews is defined as a structured interview is a type of interview in which the interviewer asks a particular set of predetermined questions.
And these are some characteristics of structured interviews. Structured interviews are very formal. The questions are closed-ended. In these interviews, we ask questions in a specific order. They are preferred for a collection of quantitative data. They allow for an interview with multiple interviewees, so this is very nice for data collection. They're easier to analyze. And the interviewer has more control over the interview.
The coming one is unstructured interview. And an unstructured interview is a type of interview in which the interviewer asks questions which are not prepared in advance.
These are some characteristics of unstructured interviews. Unlike structured interviews, unstructured interviews are more informal. There is no restriction of scope and context, so they can cover a wide range of topics and discussions. There are no predefined questions. And because of this, they're naturally more conversational in nature. However, there are some disadvantages of unstructured interviews. There is limited control over the interview because it can go in many different directions depending on what the interviewee wants to talk about. Also, the data is totally qualitative and thus very difficult to replicate. And obviously, this format can be very time-consuming. And finally, there is greater potential for interviewer bias.
Next, we are going to discuss semi-structured interviews. A semi-structured interview is a type of interview in which the interviewer asks only a few predetermined questions while the rest of the questions are not planned in advance.
these are some characteristics of semi-structured interviews. So semi-structured are going to have a combination of the qualities of structured and unstructured. Therefore, there will be some predefined questions and some spontaneous questions in these types of interviews. However, they're not completely unstructured. There are some guidelines. There are preset questions that set these guidelines for the interview. Quantitative data can still be collected. However, great care has to be taken where the spontaneous question should be asked. Next, we're going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of interviews. First, let's talk about the advantages. Interviews are a way to provide accurate screening. Because they are conversational and you're meeting people face to face, you're able to capture verbal and nonverbal cues. These interviews help to keep focus, and also interviews are very good at capturing emotions and behaviors. These are some disadvantages of interviews. First, cost. Usually we think of cost in terms of money, but cost can also mean time spent or travel. So sometimes when you interview, you have to go a long distance to meet the interviewee, and that takes time and money and resources. Interviews are high cost activities. Also, the quality of data you get from an interview is going to be dependent on the skill of the interviewer. Also, interviews are very difficult to record. You have to manually enter data. And finally, because you can't interview everyone, your sample size is often limited. And also the amount of time it takes to interview people limits the amount of interviews you can do.
Based on all these, and especially the type of interviews, we can see that unstructured and semi-structured interviews are less reliable. Therefore, we recommend structured interviews for our SRS because project management can better address client needs because it is formal and structured. Also, we can see that in structured interviews, questions are planned and created in advance, which means that all interviewees are asked the same questions in the same order.
Finally, we have an interview scenario. This is an example of a one-on-one unstructured interview. Challenges of requirements elicitation. As an analyst, I need to know, what do you want?
I want you to design the software for me.
But what do you want to do with the software?
Well, I don't know until you tell me what the software can do.
Well, I can design the software to do anything.
Perfect. Can you design this software to tell you my requirements?
So this is an example of what can happen when you aren't prepared for an interview. Sometimes the client does not know his or her needs, and if you're prepared, you can elicit the required information for your software development. Thank you for listening.